Ravi, good morning.
Morning.
The President, as I mentioned in that intro, he sounded like he didn't have much of a choice but to open the economy, of course, with the gradual approach that the Cabinet has said.
Well, I mean, that was to be expected. If you looked at the conversations that have been going on over the past couple of weeks especially, I mean, his ministers have been consulting with business lobbies and business organizations where, without exception, everyone has been making the case for that reopening of the economy. The question has been how fast, and so on. So that was to be expected. Where I thought there was a great deal of room for the President to have said more, especially in light of what needs to happen next, I got a sense that the President missed quite a few opportunities. I'm saying that because for the past few weeks you have seen a criticism, insults even, thrown at some of his ministers. There are people who seem to think that the President looks at these things differently from the way some of his ministers look at them. You probably would have seen
a specific case, maybe.
Yes, you would have seen even last night after the speech, the President said, "Oh, the President was very presidential." But you know what? Can't wait to hear what Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma or Ibrahim Patel, or Bheki Cele are going to say. And I'm saying that, for me, is a problem, especially when you listen to the President right towards the end of his speech where he was acknowledging that, mistakes were made. Some of us may be disappointed by some of the things that have happened, but promising, of course, to make amends. I thought it was very important for the President to, at the very least, even if it's in broad strokes, to speak to some of the issues that are foremost in the minds of South Africans, but to also send a message unequivocally that he is behind the ministers who are going to give the detail of what needs to happen next. And that, for me, is what was missing.
It's interesting that you speak about the treatment of ministers, but the same could be said, or the same could be leveled at the governing party, which has asked the President to rein in his finance minister. This was, in fact, the story you brought to us yesterday. The President seems to avoid talking about his ministers or addressing any of their behavior publicly.
Well, he could rein them in. He could speak to them privately. But here's what is important. This thing has been going on for a while now, where people say that the President speaks so well and they're fully behind him, but wait till his ministers mess it up. And I'm saying it cannot be. It cannot be. These people serve at the behest of the President. Whatever gets decided, whatever the President gets to say, or those ministers get to say when they give the detail of what needs to happen next, they would have discussed that in one room together with their boss and, of course, the experts that they bring in to discuss some of these things. And I think the President should have sent that message loudly and clearly to say, when NG Motshekga speaks this morning, about what's going to happen in basic education, given the anxieties that have been expressed by both parents and teachers. Bear in mind that we've considered this thing very holistically. So whatever she will be saying this morning has the full support and endorsement of our cabinet.
Right.
And the same needed to be said about Ibrahim Patel, and the same would need to be said about Tito Mboweni, who has to present a budget in a couple of weeks' time.
Quick question before we close our discussion. A fine balancing act, that's been almost a recurring sort of phrase. The President saying last night, these measures that we are preparing to implement now, the level 3 lockdown, hopefully by month end May, is about, and I quote, saving lives while at the same time preserving livelihoods. he surely is a man who's under extreme pressure. I don't know if you caught sight of the comments made by the Sibanye CEO, Neil Froneman, yesterday, who was again lamenting what he said was the lack of leadership on the part of the president.
You see, this is exactly what is problematic with how the president tends to approach these things sometimes, because I would have wanted him to send a message out there to business, say this is no license for anybody to put profits
before lives.
Before lives. Send that message unequivocally. Look at what is happening in the Western Cape, for example, right? Where it's got the highest numbers of infections, and these numbers continue to rise. I would have wanted the president to speak to that, to at least give us a sense, of what he thinks, what the information he has at his disposal says, and what he thinks of it. Especially given the fact that that province is run by a different political party. So politics come, into play as well. I would have wanted the president to say something about what we saw in Lusikisiki, over a week ago, how there has been no leadership there to actually say this calls for an emergency and a drastically different way of doing things. I would have wanted him to say, those things. Hence, I'm saying, he could have said, a lot more, because those things are important. And to also address the most basic of all questions, which is, we are on lockdown because we wanted to give our health system a chance to adequately prepare for whatever eventuality as we continue to see the numbers going up. Yeah. I would have wanted him to say unequivocally, we're satisfied or not satisfied, or yes, we've done well here, and we've not, but there are still these remaining challenges. Yeah. Because that readiness, is important. Look, for us to know his assessment of that readiness is very, very much important.
All right. Vuyo Mvogo, thank you very much. I think we can all thank our lucky stars that we are not in a position of the president.
Don't envy
thank
him,
you indeed.
But hey, we all have to do what we have to do from our respective
thank you very
little corners.
Yensia is a political editor, Vuyo Mvogo.